Once upon a time, there was a sweet little girl who was loved by everybody, but she was especially dear to her grandmother, who was always doing nice things for her. Once she made her a little red velvet cloak. She liked it so much she would never wear anything else, and so she got the name of Red Riding Hood. One day her mother said to her, "Come here, dear, and take this cake to grandmother. She is sick in bed, and it will do her good. Go quickly, and don't dawdle on the way, and don't run, for you might trip and squish the cake." Now her grandmother lived in the woods, a good half-hour from the village. Once in the woods, she met a wolf. Red Riding Hood didn't know how wicked wolves were, so she wasn't afraid. "Good morning, Red Riding Hood," he said. "Good morning, Wolf," she answered. "Where are you going so early, Red Riding Hood?" "To my grandmother's. She's sick, and I'm taking her this cake to make her feel better." "Where does she live?" asked the wolf slyly. "Oh, a good quarter of an hour further into the woods. Her house stands under 3 big oak trees. You've probably seen it," said Red Riding Hood. The wolf thought, "This tender little creature will make a good meal. I must be smart and snap them both up." So he walked along with Red Riding Hood for a while. Then he said, "Look at the pretty flowers. Don't you think it would be nice to gather a bouquet for your grandmother?" The little girl thought it was a marvelous suggestion. So she left the path and started to gather a lovely bunch of flowers. In the meantime, the wolf went straight to the grandmother's cottage and knocked at the door. "Who is there?" The wolf answered, "It is I, Red Riding Hood, bringing you a cake. Open the door." "Lift the handle," called out the old woman. "I'm too weak to get up." The wolf lifted the handle and the door sprang open. He ran straight in and up to the bed and gobbled up the poor old woman. Then he put on her nightgown and cap, got into bed, and drew the curtains. Red Riding Hood soon arrived with the cake and her flowers, and was surprised to find the door open. She thought this very strange, so she called out, "Good morning, grandmother." No answer. Then she went up to the bed and pulled back the curtain. There lay her grandmother, with a cap down over her face, looking very odd. "Oh, grandmother, what big ears you have," she said. "The better to hear you with, my dear." "Well, grandmother, what big eyes you have." "The better to see you with, my dear." "What big hands you have, grandmother." "The better to hold you with, my dear." Then she said, "But grandmother, what big teeth you have." "The better to eat you with, my dear." And with that the wolf leapt out of bed, grabbed Little Red Riding Hood and gobbled her up. Now that his stomach was full, the wolf went back to bed and soon fell fast asleep. A hunter passing by thought it very strange to hear loud snoring this time of day, and decided to investigate. So he went into the house, where he found the wolf fast asleep. He was about to raise his gun and shoot, when he heard strange, muffled noises coming from within the wolf's tummy. So he took a knife and quietly made a slit on its stomach. At first he saw a little red cloak, and soon the little girl sprang out. Next they helped her grandmother out, who was so weak she could hardly stand up. Then Red Riding Hood brought some big stones, which they put into the wolf, and the grandmother sewed him back up. Then the hunter yelled, "Aha! At last I've got you cornered." The wolf awoke with a start and bolted out of the house. He tripped and fell into the well, and with all the stones in him, he sank right to the bottom. Then Red Riding Hood and her grandmother and the hunter sat down and had tea and cake, and all was well with the world. Long, long ago, there was a water nymph named Clytie, who lived in a cave at the bottom of the sea. The walls of the cave were covered with pearls and lovely pink seashells. The floor was made of snow-white sand, and the chairs were of coral with soft moss cushions. Behind the cave were Clytie's gardens. Here she spent hours taking care of her sea ferns, her star lilies, and rare types of seaweed. Clytie kept her favorite horses in the grotto. These were the swift-darting goldfish and the slow-moving turtles. For a long time she was happy and contented. Other sea nymphs loved Clytie and wove her dresses of green sea lace. One day they took her to hear a mermaid sing. Clytie liked best the song that told of a glorious light that shone on top of the water. She longed day and night to see this wonderful light, but no ocean nymph dared to take her to it. Soon she grew very unhappy, and to escape the nymphs begging her to forget the light, she spent more and more time in her shell carriage, pulled by the turtles riding far from her cave. She would doze off and dream of the glorious light the mermaid had called the sun. Late one summer night, when the sea was warm and the turtles were going slowly, Clytie fell asleep. Unguided, the turtles went on and on, up and up, through the green water until they came to a wooded island. As the waves dashed the carriage on the rocks, Clytie awoke, and filled with wonder, she climbed out on a rock. It was early dawn, and the waking world was beautiful. Clytie had never seen trees and flowers and birds. Suddenly the eastern sky blazed with light. Great purple curtains lifted, and slowly a great ball of fire appeared, dazzling her eyes. In the middle of the light was a golden chariot, drawn by 4 fiery horses, and in it sat a smiling king, with 7 rays of light for a crown. Clytie sat and watched him all day with love in her heart, and when the chariot disappeared in the west, she wept. The next day she gazed lovingly at the king again, but she had no hope he would even notice her, and so it went on for 9 days. On the 10th morning, when she leaned over the water, she was amazed, for instead of her own face, a beautiful flower looked up at her from the sea, and at length she knew the truth. Her yellow hair had become golden petals, her green dress had turned into leaves and stems, and her little feet had become roots which fastened her to the ground. Then she lifted her face to the sun, and it was so radiant with happiness that the great king himself smiled back at her. So Clytie began her life on earth, and she raised a large family. Her children are called sunflowers, and you will find them all over the world. And if you care to, you may find out for yourselves whether or not it is true that all the sunflowers in the world turn upon their stalks from sunrise until sunset, so that they may always keep their faces toward the sun. There was once a man and his wife who for many years had wanted a child, and at last they had reason to believe their wish would soon be granted. One day the woman sat at her window and looked into the garden next door, which belonged to a powerful witch who was feared by everyone. In the garden was growing a certain kind of lettuce, which looked so fresh and green that the wife decided she simply must have some of it to eat, or she would just die. Now the husband, who loved her very much, decided he would try to get some for her, because he didn't want her to be disappointed. So in the twilight, he quietly climbed over the witch's wall and crept into her garden. Suddenly there was a flash of light, and there in front of him stood the witch. "How dare you come into my garden?" she said with fire in her eyes. Oh, be merciful, Madam Witch," he answered. "I am here because my wife saw your beautiful lettuce from her window, and her desire to have some is so strong that without it she will die." The witch's anger calmed down, and she said, "If that is true, I will allow you to take as much as you like, but on one condition. You must give me the child your wife is about to bring into the world. I will care for it like a mother, and all will be well." In his fear, the man consented to everything, and when the baby was born, the witch appeared, gave it the name of Rapunzel, and took it away with her. Rapunzel was the most beautiful child under the sun, and when she was 12 years old, the witch shut her up in a tower deep in the woods. It had no staircase and no doors, but only a little window high up in the wall. When the witch wanted to enter the tower, she stood at the bottom and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel had beautiful long hair, as fine as spun gold. As soon as she heard the witch, she unfastened her braids and twisted them around a hook by the window. They reached all the way to the ground, and the witch climbed up by them. A couple of years later, it happened the king's son rode through the forest and came close to the tower. From there he heard a song so lovely that he stopped to listen. It was Rapunzel, who in her loneliness was singing to pass the time away. The king's son tried to find an entrance, but there was none to find. He rode home, but the song had touched his heart so deeply that he rode into the forest every day to listen. One day he hid behind a tree and saw the witch come to the tower and call, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Then Rapunzel lowered her golden braids, and the witch climbed up. "If that is the way to the tower, I will try my luck," he thought. And the next day, when it began to grow dark, he went to the tower and called, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The hair fell down, and the king's son climbed up it. At first Rapunzel was terrified, for she had never seen a man before. But the king's son talked to her kindly, and told her that his heart had been so deeply touched by her song that he had to see her. And when he asked if she would become his wife, she saw that he was young and handsome, and she knew he would love her. So she said, "Yes, I will gladly marry you. But how can I get down from this tower? Perhaps when you come, you can bring some strong silk. I will twist it into a rope, and when it is long enough, I will come down by it, and you can take me away with you on your horse." So every evening he came to see her and brought some silk. The witch discovered nothing, until one evening Rapunzel suddenly said to her, "Tell me, why is it that you are so much heavier to bring up than the young prince?" The witch flew into a terrible rage. She seized Rapunzel's beautiful hair, twisted it twice around her left hand, snatched up a pair of scissors, and cut off the braids, which fell to the ground. She was still so furious that she took poor Rapunzel away to the deepest, darkest part of the forest, where she forced her to live a life of misery. The same day on which she took Rapunzel away, the witch returned to the tower and fastened the cut-off braids to the hook by the window. And when the prince came and called, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," she lowered the braids. The prince climbed up, but there he found not his beloved Rapunzel, but the witch, who looked at him with angry and wicked eyes. "Ah," she cried mockingly, "you have come to fetch your lady love, but the pretty bird is no longer in her nest. She will sing no more, for a great cat has her, and it will scratch your eyes out too. You will never see Rapunzel again." The prince was so shocked that he fell backwards out of the window. He was not killed, but his eyes were scratched out by the thorns that grew where he fell. He wandered about blind in the woods and had nothing but roots and berries to eat. He wept and cried over the loss of his beautiful Rapunzel. In this manner he wandered for several years, and finally stumbled into the darkest part of the forest, where Rapunzel was barely staying alive. He heard a familiar voice and groped his way towards it. Rapunzel recognized him at once and fell weeping upon him. 2 of her tears fell upon his eyes, and immediately his eyes grew clear and he could see again. He took her to his kingdom, where they were received with great joy, and they lived long and happily together. There was once a miller who was very poor, but he had a beautiful daughter. Now it once happened that he had occasion to speak to the king, and in order to make himself appear more important, he said, "I have a daughter who can spin gold out of straw." The king was amazed and said, "That is certainly a wonderful art. If your daughter is that skillful, bring her to my castle tomorrow, and I will test her ability." So when the girl was brought to the castle, the king led her to a room which was full of straw, gave her a spinning wheel, and said, "Now, get to work. And if between tonight and tomorrow at dawn you have not spun this straw into gold, you must die." Then he locked the door of the room and left her alone. There sat the poor miller's daughter, who who didn't have the slightest idea how to spin straw into gold. She became so sad she began to weep. Then suddenly the door burst open, and in jumped a little man who said, "Good evening, little lady. Why are you crying?" "Alas," answered the girl, "I've got to spin gold out of straw, and I don't know how to do it." Then slyly the little man said, "What will you give me if I spin it for you?" My necklace," answered the girl. The little man took the necklace, sat down before the spinning wheel, and started to work. By morning all the straw was gone, and in its place were piles of gleaming gold. Immediately at sunrise the king came, and when he saw the gold he was astonished and very pleased, but also very greedy. So he again filled the room with straw, and ordered the miller's daughter to spin it into gold if she valued her life. Alone again, the girl began to cry. And once again the door burst open, and the little man appeared and said, "What will you give me if I spin the straw into gold for you this time?" "The ring off my finger," answered the girl. The little man took the ring, began to spin again, and by morning the floor was again covered with gold. The king was delighted with all the gold, but was still not satisfied. So he filled the room with an even bigger amount of straw and said, "You must spin this into gold tonight, but if you succeed, you shall become my queen." When the girl was alone, the little man came again and said for the third time, "What will you give me if I spin the straw for you this time?" "I have nothing more to give," answered the girl. "Well, promise me your first child if you become queen." "Who knows what may happen," thought the miller's daughter, but she didn't see how she had any choice, so she agreed. When the king came in the morning and found all the gold, he had the marriage performed, and the miller's daughter became queen. About a year later, a beautiful child was born, and by now the queen had forgotten all about the little man. But suddenly he appeared in her room and said, "Now give me what you promised." The queen was terrified and offered the little man all the wealth of the kingdom if he would just let her keep the child. But the little man refused. The queen began to moan and weep so much that the little man felt sorry for her. "I will give you 3 days," he said, "and if you discover my name within that time, you shall keep the child." So during the night the queen wrote down all the names she had ever heard and sent a messenger out to discover more. When the little man appeared the next day, she began with Casper, Andre, Melchior, and mentioned all the names that she knew. "No, no, no, that's not my name." The second day she asked around the neighborhood for names of people living there and suggested to the little man most unusual names. "Perhaps your name is Cow Ribs, or Spindle Shanks, or Spider Legs." But again he answered, No, that's not my name." On the third day, the messenger came back and said, "I haven't been able to find any new names, but as I came around the corner of some woods on the high mountain, I saw a little house, and in front of the house a fire was burning, and around the fire a most ridiculous little man leaping. He was hopping on one leg and chanting, 'Today I brew, tomorrow I bake, and then the queen's child I will take, for no one knows my little game, that Rumplestilitskin is my name.' You can imagine how delighted the queen was when she heard the name. And soon the little man came in and asked, 'Now, your majesty, what is my name?' At first she asked, 'Is your name Tom?' 'No.' 'Is it Dick?' 'No.' 'Is it, by chance, Rumpelstiltskin?' 'Somebody told you! Somebody told you!' shrieked the little man. And in his rage he stamped his right foot so hard that he sank right into the ground and disappeared, and no one ever saw him again. There was once a prince, and he wanted a princess, but she must be a real princess. He traveled all over the world to find one, but there was always something wrong. There were plenty of princesses, but as to whether they were real princesses, he had great difficulty in discovering. There was always something which was not quite right about them. So at last he had to come home again, and he was very sad, because he wanted a real princess so badly. One evening there was a terrible storm. There was thunder and lightning, and the rain poured down in torrents. Indeed, it was a dreadful night. In the middle of the storm, somebody knocked at the town gate, and the old king himself went to open it. It was a princess who stood outside, but she was in a terrible state from the rain and the storm. The water streamed out of her hair and her clothes. It ran in at the top of her shoes and out at the heel. But she said that she was a real princess. Well, we shall soon see if that is true, thought the old queen, but she said nothing. She went into the bedroom, took all the bedclothes off, and laid a single green pea on the bedstead. Then she took 20 mattresses and piled them on top of the pea, and then piled 20 feather beds on the top of the mattresses. Up on top of all these was where the princess was to sleep that night. In the morning they asked her, "Did you sleep well?" "Oh, terribly badly," said the princess. "I hardly closed my eyes the whole night. Heaven knows what was in that bed. I seem to be lying on something very hard, and my whole body is black and blue this morning. It was terrible." They saw at once that she must be a real princess when she had felt the pea through 20 mattresses and 20 feather beds. Nobody but a real princess could have such a delicate skin. So the prince took her to be his wife, for now he was sure that he had found a real princess. And the pea was put into a museum, where it may still be seen, if no one has stolen it. Now you may be sure this is a true story. A certain man had a donkey, which for many years carried sacks to the mill without tiring. At last, however, its strength was worn out, and it was no longer any good for work. So its master began to think that it was time to get rid of him. But the donkey, sensing something in the air, ran away and started on the road to Bremen. There he thought he could become a town musician. When he had traveled a short time, he came upon a dog who was lying panting on the road as though he had run too hard. "Why are you panting so, Growler?" said the donkey. "Ah," said the dog, "just because I am old, and every day I get weaker. And because I cannot keep up with the hunting pack anymore, my master wanted to kill me. So I ran away. Now how can I earn my food?" "Do you know what?" said the donkey. "I'm going to Bremen, and shall become a town musician. Come with me. I shall play the flute, and you shall beat a kettle drum." The dog agreed, and they went on. A short time afterwards they came upon a cat sitting in the road, with a face as long as a wet week. "Well, why are you so cross, Whiskers?" the donkey asked him. "Who can be cheerful when he's out at the elbows?" said the cat. "I'm getting on in years, and my teeth are blunt, and I prefer to sit by the stove and purr instead of hunting mice. Because of this, my mistress decided to drown me, so I ran away, and now I don't know where to turn." "Come with us to Bremen," said the donkey. "You are very good at serenading, so you can become a town musician." The cat agreed and joined them. Next the runaways passed by a yard where a rooster was up on the roof, crowing with all his might. "You crow so loud you pierce my eardrums," said the donkey. "What's the matter?" "Just because Sunday visitors are coming tomorrow, the mistress has no pity and has ordered the cook to make me into soup. So now I'm crowing with all my might while I still have a chance." "Come along with us, Redcomb," said the donkey. "We're going to Bremen and make music together. You will add quality with your fine voice." The rooster was easily persuaded, and all four trotted off together. By evening they had reached some woods, and decided to spend the night there and continue to Bremen in the morning. The donkey and the dog lay down under a big tree. The cat nestled in the tree, and the rooster flew right up to the top. Before going to sleep, he looked around in every direction. Suddenly he called out to his friends that he saw a light not far off. "Very well," said the donkey. "Let us go to it, for it must be a house, and that would certainly be more comfortable than where we are." So they set out in the direction of the light, and soon they found themselves at a robber's den. The donkey, being the tallest, peeked in the window. "What do you see?" asked the rooster. "I see a table spread with delicious food," answered the donkey, "and robbers are seated there enjoying it all. Oh, if we were only there." Then the animals went into a huddle, and at last hit upon a plan. They all stood at the window, and at the count of 3 began their music. The donkey hee-hawed, the dog howled, the cat meowed, and the rooster crowed. Then they crashed through the window, spraying broken glass in every direction. The robbers were so scared that they jumped up and ran terrified out into the woods. Then 4 animals sat down at the table and had a delicious feast. When they finished, they put out the light, and each went to sleep in a spot that suited him. The donkey lay down on a pile of straw, the dog behind the door, the cat on the hearth near the warm ashes, and the rooster flew up to the rafters. Soon they fell fast asleep. After midnight, the robbers saw there was no longer a light, so they decided to investigate. The chief ordered one of the robbers to go and examine the house. Finding everything quiet, the robber went into the kitchen to light a lamp. And thinking the cat's glowing eyes were live coals, he held a match close to them to light it. But instead, the cat flew at his face. He spat and he scratched. The robber was terribly frightened and ran away. He tried to get out the back door, but the dog, who was lying there, jumped up and bit his leg. As he ran across the pile of straw, the donkey gave him a good sound kick with his hind legs, while the rooster screeched his cock-a-doodle-doo from his perch up in the rafters. The robber ran back to his chief as fast as he could and said, "There is a horrible witch in the house who breathed fire on me and scratched me with her long fingers. Behind the door was a man with a knife who stabbed me, and near him is a black monster who hit me with a club. And on the roof is a hideous ogre who screamed at me, so I ran away as fast as I could." The robbers didn't dare return to the house, which pleased the Bremen musicians so much that they stayed there forever.